So, you've built an app and it's live on the App Store. Users seem to love it and the reviews are overwhelmingly positive. But then, one day, something strange happens. A user reaches out to you by email and they write to you to let you know that they would like you to delete their account. You've put so much effort into your app, so receiving an email like that really hurts, but you pull yourself together, delete the user's account, and then reply to them to thank them for having been a loyal user for the past couple of weeks and months. Hey, my name is Peter, and I'm a developer advocate on the Firebase team. In this video, let's talk about a difficult topic, a topic that's often swept under the rug, a topic that's uncomfortable for many of us, deleting user accounts and their associated data. Let's be honest, breaking up never feels great, but sometimes it is time to move on. So if your users don't want to continue using your app any longer, you should make it easy for them and for you to let them go. After all, you don't want users to write in or call you to delete their user accounts. Your time is too precious to deal with menial tasks like that. Also, and this is particularly important if you develop for Apple's platforms, Apple has added a paragraph to the App Store review guidelines that requires you to offer an account deletion flow in your app if your app allows users to create accounts. So today, I'll show you how to delete Firebase user accounts from inside your app, how to revoke the user's tokens if they signed in using Sign In with Apple, and how to delete any of the user's data completely automatic. Here is the sample app we've been using in all of the previous videos. It allows users to sign in and store their favorites in the cloud. So this user here seems to really like the number 17 and their favorite city is London. I can relate to that. Users can also choose to share their favorites with other users of the app by ticking this checkbox. Other users will then be able to see this information in this list. Here are the favorites of some of the other users of the app. And here is the user's profile screen. It shows some information about the user and also features a button to initiate deleting the user account. To prevent the user from accidentally deleting their account, we will ask them if they are sure before going ahead and deleting their account. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and implement this. So here I am in the authentication view model in the method that will be called when the user has confirmed they are sure about deleting their account. Notice that this method is marked async. This is because most Firebase APIs are asynchronous and can be called using Swift's async await. You can delete a user account by calling the delete method on a Firebase user object. This view model has a property named user, which holds the currently signed in user, so I can go ahead and call user.delete asynchronously. This call might throw an error, so I will wrap it inside some error handling code. At this point, the video could be over, but unfortunately, it's not as easy as that, so let's keep going. Since deleting a user account is a security-sensitive operation, Firebase requires that the user has signed in recently. If you try to perform a security-sensitive operation and the user hasn't signed in recently, Firebase will throw an exception. To prevent this, we'll check if the user has signed in the past 5 minutes. If that's not the case, we will run a reauthentication flow. In this example, I assume that user signed in using Sign In with Apple, but in a real app, you should either use the same authentication mechanism the user used when signing in the last time, or give them an option to choose. Once the user has signed in, I will use the information returned from the provider to create a fresh credential and then call user.reauthenticate with this credential. Great. After making sure the user has recently signed in, we can then delete the user. At this point, the video could be over, but unfortunately, it's not as easy as that, so let's keep going. There is one more thing we need to consider if the user has signed in using Sign In with Apple. You might be aware that Apple requires apps that offer account creation to also provide a way to delete the user account from within the app. Now, you might think, didn't we just talk about this? And you're right. Deleting the user account is an important step, but there is another important step we need to take, and that is to delete the user's access and refresh tokens. You see, when a user signs in with Apple, your app will receive an ID token with information about the user along with an authorization code. Your app will then be listed in the user's Apple ID dashboard. In order for the app to be removed from this list, you will have to revoke any access and refresh tokens that are associated with it. Let me walk you through the steps required to do this with Firebase. First, when setting up Sign-in with Apple with Firebase, you need to provide a couple of pieces of extra information in the Sign-in with Apple Authentication Provider section. Specifically, you will need to fill out the services ID and the OAuth code flow section. The Firebase documentation contains detailed instructions on how to do this, so let me walk you through the individual steps. So the first thing we need to do is to enable the Sign-in with Apple provider. And that's the easy part. The next thing you need to do is create a services ID. To do this, sign into your Apple developer account and go to Certificates, Identifiers, and Profiles. In the sidebar, click Identifiers and then click the Add button. Select Services ID, then click Continue. Enter the services ID description and provide a unique identifier. Click on Register to register the services ID. The services ID should now appear in this list. In the next step, we will register it for Sign-in with Apple. Click on the service ID and in the next section, tick the Sign in with Apple checkbox. Now click the Configure button. In the next screen, select your primary app ID from the dropdown. For the next step, you will need the authorization callback URL for your Firebase project. You can find this at the bottom of the Sign-in with Apple provider configuration, and it should look like this. Take this URL and enter it into the Return URLs field. Then remove the path and the protocol of the URL and paste the remaining URL into the Domains and Subdomains field. Click on Next, then review your configuration, and click on Done. Click Continue, review everything, and click on Save. Copy your services ID and paste it into the services ID field in the Sign-in with Apple provider configuration in the Firebase console. Well done. We're almost there. In the next step, you will create a private key for Sign-in with Apple. Go back to the Certificates, Identifiers, and Profiles section in your Apple developer account. In the sidebar, select Keys, then click the plus button. Type in a unique name for your key. Select the Sign-in with Apple checkbox, and then click on the Configure button. Select your app from the list of apps, then click on Save, click on Continue, review everything, and then click on Register. You can now download your key. Please keep in mind that you cannot re-download the key, so keep it in a safe place after downloading it. Also, please don't check it into your source code repository. Open the downloaded file in a text editor, copy the entire contents, and then paste them into the private key field in the Firebase console. Go back to your Apple developer account, copy the ID of the key, and paste it into the key ID field in the Firebase console. Go back to your Apple developer account one more time, copy your team ID, which you should be able to find right here next to your name, and paste it into the Apple team ID field in the Firebase console. Don't forget to click on Save in the Firebase console. Once that is set up, we can revoke the token in our app by using the revoke token call. This function expects an authorization code. So in order to get an authorization code, you will have to ask the user to sign in with Apple again. Now, you might think that this is a bit strange. Why do we need to ask the user to sign in again before we can actually delete their account? Well, just like deleting the user's account, revoking their tokens is a security-sensitive operation. After all, the user's account and their data will be permanently deleted. And we want to be absolutely sure that this is not happening accidentally, or someone who has somehow gotten access to the user's phone can maliciously perform those operations. And this is why the user has to authenticate again before you can revoke their tokens. The good news is that we've already written code that asks the user to sign in again for the reauthentication flow. We can rearrange the code a bit to make sure we don't have to ask the user to sign in several times in a row, because that would definitely be rather confusing. Once the user has signed in again, we can then use the authentication code to call auth.revokeToken. Firebase will retrieve the access token associated with this user and then call Apple's token revocation endpoint to revoke the token. Once this is done, your app will also disappear from the list of apps using Sign In with Apple in the user's Apple ID dashboard. Great, so now you know how to delete a Firebase user and how to revoke their tokens if they've used Sign In with Apple. But what about their data? Well, you might consider deleting the user's data from the client. For example, here's how you can delete a single Firestore document using the SDK. However, I would strongly advise you to not do this. Your users might have stored a lot of data, and deleting all of this data might take quite a while. Also, you might run the risk of this process being interrupted before it's finished, for example, when the user is on a flaky connection. And that's not ideal. So we want to delete the data using a process which runs on the backend. One way to do this is to write a Cloud function to delete the user's data. But because deleting user data is such a common scenario, the Firebase team has done the hard work for you and implemented a Firebase extension that you can install into your app with just a couple of clicks. So I will go ahead and install the delete user data extension using the Firebase console. This extension will be triggered whenever a user account is deleted. It will then go off and delete the user's data in Firestore, the real-time database, and cloud storage. During the setup process, I can configure this extension to meet my needs. So all of the data in my app is stored in Cloud Firestore in a collection called Favorites. Each document has an attribute called user ID, which contains the user ID of the user who owns this document. To delete all of the user's data, all I need to do is to enable auto discovery. This will scan all collections for documents that might belong to the user who is being deleted. To detect which documents belong to a user, I can then specify the name of the field that contains the user ID. And as you can see, this is already filled with a couple of useful presets, so I can go ahead and finish the installation. After a couple of minutes, the extension is installed and ready to be used. Time to get a coffee. Right. Okay, we're back. Every time a user account is deleted, the extension will be triggered to search for all the user's documents according to the configuration and then delete them. You can modify the configuration of the extension if you later store data in other Firebase services, or if you need to make adjustments to where this data is stored. All right, so let's do a full run-through of the application to see all of this in action. When I launch the application, no one is signed in, so I will sign in using Sign In with Apple. I'll enter my favorites and tap on Save. This data is now stored in Firestore, and as you can see, the user ID field of the document contains my user's ID. In the Apple ID dashboard for my test user, I can now see that my application is connected to this Apple ID. I'll go back to the application, open the profile dialog to see the details of my user account. Cool. So let me now delete the user account. After confirming that I'm quite sure, the app will present the Sign In with Apple flow. And as mentioned earlier, this is required to obtain the authorization code that is required to revoke my access and refresh tokens. Once I authenticate using Sign In with Apple, the app will first revoke my access and refresh tokens, and then delete my user account. This, in turn, will trigger the extension, which will then delete all of the data that belongs to this user. And as you can see, the Firestore document with the user's data just disappeared. So let's first go to the Apple ID dashboard and verify that my sample app has been removed from the list of apps that use Sign in with Apple. And sure enough, it's gone. Check. Next, let's head over to the Firebase console, go to the authentication section, and check if the user account has been deleted. And voila, it's gone. Check. And finally, let's go to Firestore to see if the user data has been deleted. And lo and behold, the user's data has been wiped out. So there you have it, deleting user accounts and their associated data. I think it's good practice to offer users an easy way to close their accounts if they decide they no longer want to use your app. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below or hit me up on social media. I'm @PeterFries on Twitter and @PeterFries@iosdev.space on Mastodon. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.